Welcome back to the Get Loved Up podcast, your number one resource for inspiration and motivation to live your purpose, make healthy living a priority, and thrive doing what you love. I'm your host, Koya Webb, a small town girl who chased her dreams and caught them, a former track and field athlete who healed using spirituality and yoga, and an entrepreneur who didn't let sexual assault, racism, and insecurities dim her light. And now it's your turn to allow these episodes with some of the top voices in spirituality, wellness, and entrepreneurship to inspire you to thrive. Let's get loved up together. For over 16 years, Gabby Bernstein has been transforming lives, including her own. The number one New York Times bestselling author has penned 9 books, including The Universe Has Your Back, Super Attractor, and her latest, Happy Days. In her weekly podcast, Dear Gabby, she offers up real-time coaching, straight talk, and conversations about personal growth and spirituality with unique and inspiring guests. What started as hosting intimate conversations with 21 people in her New York City apartment, Gabby has grown into speaking to tens of thousands of sold-out venues throughout the world. Gabby was featured on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday as a next-generation thought leader. The Oprah Winfrey Network chose Gabby to be part of the Super Soul 100, a dynamic group of trailblazers whose vision and life's work are bringing a higher level of consciousness to the world. The New York Times identified Gabby as a role model, and she co-hosted the Guinness Book World Records largest meditation with Deepak Chopra and appears regularly as an expert on Today and Good Morning America, among other publications. She connects with her community through her books, her Miracle membership, and her podcast, Dear Gabby. To learn more about Gabby, visit GabbyBernstein.com. Gabby, how are you?
I'm good, Mama. How are you?
I am wonderful. And I'm so excited. I mean, this interview, it just has me on a level 10 because you're one of those people that when I first started my spiritual journey, I was looking up to Marianne Williamson and Deepak Chopra and Michael Bernard Beckwith and, all these spiritual guides. And you were one of the few women my age that I could really relate to in the spiritual community. So thank you for saying yes to your own path, because you've, of course, inspired millions around the world. But specifically me, I just wanted to say thank you in person.
You are so welcome. And I really appreciate witnessing people who are in our generation that have made that call, have responded to that call and made that commitment. It's beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And our journeys are very different, but I really want to start with you taking people back to that moment when you made that decision, back to when you were 25, back to when you weren't the epic, spiritual guru as you are. But one thing I will say, you are definitely relatable. You definitely never, just shy away from the fact that we all go through things all of our life. And that's one thing I love about you. But I would love for you to share kind of your journey when you really opened up to your spiritual path.
My spiritual path really began when I was a kid. My mom was very spiritual, and she would bring us to ashrams, and we were named by the gurus. And I had, meaning me and my brother, and we had a really spiritual upbringing, witnessing my mother meditating and listening to mantras. And that wasn't something that was foreign to me, but it was my own personal journey that really ignited that spark of spiritual faith in me, which was getting sober at the age of 25. And I got clean and sober and very quickly was returning to my spiritual faith that I'd had as a child and establishing what it meant to me. And I too had all of those self-help books of Wayne Dyer and Marianne Williamson and Deepak and all of them next to my bed. And they were such a source of inspiration for me, particularly early in my sober recovery. And listening to their audios and practicing those principles really helped me recognize that I too had a mission in this lifetime to be a translator and a conduit through which spiritual principles were delivered in a way that would be digestible, easy for people to really take in and apply. And ultimately, that is what I ended up doing with the rest of my life. And that is the core through line of my life, is to be a conduit to help people crack open to that presence of love within themselves, and to let that come through me to allow others to see that in themselves.
I love that. I love that so much. And I know you share a lot in your book about your journey, but I don't remember if you have ever shared, where I've heard specifically, what do you feel like really made you divert? Because we all, are raised with our parents doing the best they can. Everyone's different, but having that spiritual upbringing, what do you think made you divert? Was it something specific, or were you just being a young one and just trying all the things? But what made you shift from that path?
Well, I never understood why I was an alcoholic and a drug addict until I was 36. So I got sober at 25. And by the time I was 11 years sober, that was when I realized why I was using in the first place. And that was when I remembered childhood trauma. And I believe all addicts that have such an extreme way of protecting themselves through addiction are in some way running from a traumatized experience, a trauma of some kind. All humans really have trauma, but when we get that blown out through addiction, it's typically sometimes a big T trauma. And for me, I had dissociated from that memory, and it came back to me in a dream when I was 36 years old. And so that was really the moment when I realized, oh, that's why you turned your back on your spiritual back. That's why you were so strung out. That's why you were an addict. Really, frankly, that's it. Just plain and simple. And so it would take me that long to get there and to understand that.
And I know that you, in your book, you talk about this dissociation, and I had never realized how I dissociate until I read about it in your book. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's what I've done. And I still do that. And so can you talk a little bit about your experience with dissociation, and is it still present in your life now, or is it something that you have a handle on?
Yeah, well, I think we all dissociate in different ways. And when we've had extreme trauma, we can go as far as dissociating in such an extreme way where we literally tuck away the memory, and it's a brain function that is developed to protect us, and it protects us temporarily, but we still can live with the feelings that are so impermissible, and they show up in our responses to things, and they show up in the way that we lead, in the way that we love, in the way that we eat, in the way that we sleep. It's just going to keep showing up in our body until we actually address it. And we have ways of unconsciously dissociating as well. Like when something is triggering to us, we can shut down or numb out. And does that still come up for me at times? Yeah, it does. But I have a very strong awareness of that part of me, and I can witness it with a lot of compassion and then help myself get back into my body and get back into my present moment. But it is something that people do not speak about often, and it is important to talk about it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Just talking about it, which you did great in your book, Happy Days. Like I loved how you were just, you stood up for yourself with the publisher. You were like, hey, I really want to allow this vulnerable part of me to come through. Can you talk a little bit about how challenging that was? Because I've definitely had conversations with the publisher, and I haven't been on the winning end. So I would love for you to share that process and what really empowered you to move forward.
Yeah, in the beginning of the book, I talk about how my publisher said, we're nervous for you, Gabby. You're sharing one negative story after the next, and you're being too vulnerable. You're not showing your true strength. And my response was, my ability to be this vulnerable is my true strength. And that's the truth. And in my last interview right before you, the writer asked me, do you regret being so vulnerable? And I said, no, I would only regret it if I wasn't this vulnerable. And so I think that when we sign up to be a teacher and a healer or a leader and speak on behalf of personal growth and spiritual principles, we're also signing up to be real and to tell the truth. And of course, sometimes you have to be, of course, boundaried, and you don't want to be so vulnerable that you blow yourself out or that you trigger other people. But I knew I was safe enough to do that. And I did. And so I'm glad I stuck to it.
And what provides you that safety? Do you feel
The work I did to get to the place where I could write this book.
I love that. Another thing that you talk about in the book, which I commend you on, but I still have a lot of questions about, and I just wanted to hear your perspective on it, was, drugs when it comes to mental health. And I, like you said in the book, I was always like, in my family, people in my family have been on medication, and it's something that I was like, I never want to have to do that. Meditation is my medication. I think we've had that same mantra, but in the book, you really say, no, you really say, sometimes this is necessary. Can you talk a little bit about that and your journey around that? Because I think it was a super important point you made, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you for bringing it up. I am another example of a lot of vulnerability in this book, but I share the story of how I went through debilitating suicidal postpartum depression, so severe that I was really having suicidal ideation. And it took me months to get the proper diagnosis and on the healing path because of the stigma around medication and around mental illness. And thankfully, I had hit such a horrific bottom that I was able to actually listen to my therapist and get psychiatric support and find my way on a healing path through medication and deep therapeutic work. And what my psychiatrist said to me before I started the medication was, she's like, I know you're resisting this, but what I want you to understand is that as soon as you get on this medication, you're going to begin to get to a safer baseline so that you can do deeper therapy. And she was absolutely correct. Once I got to that place of safety, I could go very deep into my therapy, way deeper than I would have been able to without it. And I used that medication wisely so that I could really get to the next level in my healing. And so it's very dangerous to shame psychopharmacological medication when it's necessary. When someone's having a biochemical condition, you can't meditate your way out of it. And I know that firsthand. And so there's also the other side of that, which is that medication can be very overly prescribed and people can have a lot of trouble with side effects and whatnot. So you need to get a proper, reputable psychiatric diagnosis before you start taking medication. But you also don't want to rule it out because of the shame and the stigma. It's really important to take care of yourself. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for writing about it. Was that the hardest thing that you were vulnerable about, or is there other parts that you feel like are even now very tender for you?
Everything I shared in the book, I think that I was healthy, and I know that I was healthy enough and healed enough to share about it, because if I wasn't, I wouldn't have been able to write about it. Mm-hmm. I don't feel shame around any of it, because again, if that shame was really up for me, it would be triggering my reader, it'd be triggering me to see people reading it. Mm-hmm. So I had to really get grounded in my own recovery in order to tell the story safely.
Yeah, I love that. Another thing that I loved about a book that you introduced to me was the internal family systems. Can you speak a little bit about that and how that's helped you in your journey of mental health? In my therapy with my therapist for a decade, I've practiced what's known as IFS, internal family systems therapy. And it has had such a profound effect on my life that I went ahead and got trained in the level 1 training for the system. And it's really about healing all of the parts of ourselves and nurturing and honoring and soothing all of the parts of ourselves that are really extreme, and recognizing we have all these different parts. And when we have had experiences from our childhood of trauma, small t or big T, we lock up those inner children and we're like, you're not going to ever let me come out again. I don't want to talk to you. And we build up all these protection mechanisms, which in IFS are known as protector parts. The addict, the controller, the workaholic, the dissociating part, right? The part that dissociates, the food addict, whatever it might be. And we let those protector parts run our life. But in IFS, it's about establishing a connection to the self within with a capital S, which is the resourced adult part of you, and the God within you and the love within you,
And with that connection to self, you can help the other parts relax so that they're not running your life into chaos. And so there's a whole chapter about this in the book on chapter 7. And it's a transformational therapy that changed my life, saved my life. And I hope to offer it to many people to come.
I hope people just hearing it will look into it. I know that it's on my list of things to look into. And because I feel like we always, when you go to regular therapy, you're looking at those points when you were a child, and, I've done EMDR and things like that. And you go back and you try to heal these spaces. And I feel like that's been the most profound work, is when you're really healing those wounds from childhood. Can you speak a little bit more about like, do you feel like you're holding on to any wounds now? Do you feel like, you're still working through different things? Or do you feel like you've come to a place where you've made peace with those wounds from childhood?
Oh, I've made a lot of peace, but I'm always working on myself. I still go to therapy every Wednesday at 4:45. I still do all the practices that I preach in the book daily. And I'm walking proof of what I preach. And so I won't stop. I'm never going to stop.
I love that. I love that. And what would you say for someone listening that would really like, I need help? Like, I mean, even, I wrote a post today. I was like, I've had 3 anxiety attacks, and I'm just like, and I feel like my body is literally speaking to me. And all of them circled around relationships, business and professional, that I needed to end. So can you share kind of how you, like you said, we're always constantly working on ourselves. How does the signs that things are not okay show up for you, and how do you deal with them?
Physically, they'll show up. Emotionally, they'll show up. In relationships, they often show up. And so the way I deal with them is by practicing the messages and the principles that I shared here, all of them in different ways, interchangeably. And so if someone was suffering, and if you're having panic attacks, do the practices in the book. Follow, if you feel like you have an intuition about IFS, go do IFS therapy. Really listen to the intuition that's coming through for you when you follow a book like this, because my intention is for somebody to be like, I'm struggling. I'm going to read this book. She's going to tell me all the different ways I can heal myself, and choose one and commit to it and really go for it. Really, really go for it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think one of the ones that I like, especially for anxiety, like immediately, is tapping. Of course, meditation, yoga, but I also think the tapping and the affirming is something very powerful. Can you talk a little bit about when you started tapping and how that's helped you in your journey?
No problem. Yeah, tapping is such a profound practice of really allowing yourself to settle your nervous system and rewire your brain through tapping on different energy meridians while talking about emotional disturbances. And that process, while it's sort of strange and like acupressure with therapy at once, it's very impactful and it works quickly. And it has long-lasting effects because it's reprocessing restored, unresolved, really truncated emotional disturbances. And when you do a practice like tapping, you're really showing up for yourself in a big way.
I love that. And you are a mama. You have your son, Oliver, and you like you said, you went through a lot, with the whole process. Can you talk a little bit about the process of becoming a mother, the before, the during, the after, and how you navigated that?
My journey to becoming a mother was not easy. And then parts of it were easy, and then there wasn't easy again. And then, so it's sort of, I've had a lot of miraculous experiences. Thankfully, I had a really wonderful pregnancy with my child, even though I had an amazing delivery, but I had postpartum depression and I had years of trying to conceive. And for me, I've really seen the journey of becoming a parent as a big part of my own personal spiritual awakening. I was talking to a friend yesterday who's thinking about becoming a parent. And I was like, this is the biggest up-leveling of your life. Because when you make the commitment to be a parent, you're also making the commitment to reparent yourself in many ways. And actually, that's why in the book, I have a whole chapter on reparenting yourself. Because when you undergo that type of commitment, you can really show up as an even greater parent to your children.
I love that. I was actually going to go there next. So reparenting, can you explain what reparenting is and how you use that to, as you said, make yourself a better parent?
Well, in the book, I talk about the work of Dan Siegel, who's a great parenting author and doctor. And he really gives this beautiful guidance on how to create a secure environment for your children. And it's about helping the child feel seen and soothed and safe and secure. And I started to practice these methods with my own son. And I was seeing how effective it was to be present with him and to see him and to soothe him and to help him feel safe. And I started thinking about how that really wasn't how I grew up, but just not what I got. And I thought to myself, well, what if I gave that to myself right now? And I started to apply these parenting principles onto myself and my own inner children, and witnessed the same miracles in my own world as I was having with my son. And so I decided that there had to be a way that we could do this for ourselves. And so I put it all into the book, into a chapter called Reparenting Yourself. And it's beautiful. And I love that chapter.
It is beautiful. And I've been doing that for myself as well since reading your book. And I just think it's something that we all should do. And we don't really realize how necessary it is, because especially in our generation and older, I think all generations actually, especially with more attention being outward facing, social media and things like that, sometimes it can be really hard to take time for each other. Even during the pandemic, we were together, which in a way that was good for some people, but if it was, I guess a little bit hard in family, it was not so great. Can you talk a little bit about basically being in, a relationship also, your husband and, being in a relationship and reparenting yourself? How much does that affect your partner? What is your relationship with him? Is he going through the work too? How do you work that out with having a partner?
All the work that we do on ourselves greatly benefits the people in our life. Mm-hmm. And I think that really strong relationships that have long-lasting power are those when both parties are working on themselves and the couple's working together.
Yeah.
So if you have the privilege of being in a partnership with a partner who is doing the work that you are doing on yourself, then you can expect miracles in that relationship. It's when one party is doing the work and the other one's not, and it gets a little squirrely because one person's growing and the other person's staying stagnant. And so my advice always is get into couples therapy, do the work on yourself, make sure your partner's working on themselves. Make sure you're choosing to be with a partner who wants to do that work. And that can be a really beautiful path to successful relationships and marriages. And I can definitely testify to that.
I love that. And I love your podcast, Dear Gabby. And I know you love podcasting and you really are very vulnerable and open on the podcast as well. What's your favorite episode? Do you have a favorite episode on your podcast?
What a nice question. Oh, it's my favorite episode of Dear Gabby. Probably one that's coming out this month that hasn't even come out, and it's the mental health episode. I think it's really profound. Yeah.
That's really, I feel like it's so important right now. I mean, all the questions most of this conversation has been about mental health. And even after making the post this morning, I've had at least 5 people reach out to me personally and say, thank you so much. I've been having anxiety attacks.
Yeah, it's really tough right now.
So what do you feel like, of course, it's many things, but what do you feel like is the biggest cause of such an increase in anxiety? And of course, getting your book, but what are some other things that people can do listening right now to really...
That's a nice way
to check in with themselves.
Yeah, that's a great way to bring this home. It's like there's a heightened level of anxiety majorly right now because the world is in such a crisis. But it's not that anxiety wasn't there already. It's just that it's coming out like a pressure cooker at the moment. And when the world is in crisis and things around us feel unsafe, that's when a lot of our historical pushed down, controlled anxieties start to come to the surface. And so Yes, read Happy Days. Yes, begin a meditation practice. Yes, get a proper diagnosis if you think you're having a biochemical condition. Yes, get therapeutic support. And I think that also know you're not alone. I actually have a whole episode of Dear Gabby about anxiety. So we can put that in your show notes. So you can really share that all.
Yeah, we'll definitely put that in there. And depending on when this comes out, also the mental health episode that you were talking about as well. And the other thing that I want to really talk about that I feel like you really cover very well is what you just said, not being afraid to share it. There's still, even though a lot of people are sharing, there's still a big stigma out there around sharing. What was the first time? I mean, I know you're comfortable with it now, but can you take yourself back to when you weren't comfortable with it and what helped you, break that mold, or even if there's still places that you're not as comfortable?
I think that when I first came out about the trauma from my childhood being sexual in nature, that was really hard for me to share because there's so much shame around that. So I think that's the biggest one. Yeah.
Yeah. And what helped you make that move to share?
Doing the work that I write about in the book about shame and really processing shame, and truly just all of the practices that I showed up for, the therapies, the spiritual practice, the facing into the shame really has allowed me to release it, frankly.
And I love that you keep going back to all of it, because it's not just one or two things. It is all of it. And it is constantly doing the work and being consistent, being diligent, and going to therapy. It's like, okay, I went to therapy. I don't know why it's not working anymore. No, you have to keep going.
Keep it up.
Exactly. I love that you keep bringing back all the things and all the therapies and everything that you need to be well. One thing I learned in the pandemic is I needed to slow down to be well. And I know you're doing a lot. You're on a tour with your book. What has helped you, and is there a balance? Is there a harmony you found for yourself that helps you be well?
Getting a great night's sleep is a non-negotiable for me. Eating well, practicing all the principles that I've written about for 2 decades nearly, and just making my well-being, my inner well-being, my highest priority.
Yeah. It's so true. I feel like sleep, number one, I feel like that's the number one thing, especially as an entrepreneur, even a spiritual entrepreneur, is something when you're on tour and you're a mama and you're doing all these things.
Gotta sleep.
Yeah, gotta sleep, non-negotiable. And when it comes to work, do you have any boundaries on like how much work you do in a day, or how does that work?
Yeah, I'm starting to next week do no calls on Thursdays and Fridays and limiting and actually on that note, I have another podcast coming in 3 minutes. So I'm going to take a pee break as soon as I wrap this up with you.
Okay.
I have a 2:45. They really didn't give me any time in between. So to answer that as well, we can cut that part. What I'm trying to do is also really be boundaried around my schedule and not burn myself out, because it's easy to say yes to everything, and I want to say yes to everything, but I can't. It will blow me out. Yeah.
And you're always doing such incredible work. We're so grateful for everything you've been putting out there. And I think, it has to be a moment we tell ourselves we don't have to be everything to everyone. We can just do our work and be satisfied with what it does and how it affects people. So thank you so much for just.
Thank you. You're so gorgeous. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Where can everyone find and get a copy of your book and learn a little bit more about you?
Head over to Amazon or go to your bookstores locally. And on my podcast called Dear Gabby, the book is called Happy Days, The Guided Path from Trauma to Profound Freedom and Inner Peace. And I'm at Gabby Bernstein on social media, and you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And last question. If we could wake up tomorrow and it's Gabby's world, what would it look like?
Oh, everyone would be really compassionate towards themselves and each other.
Yes. Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Gabby. I appreciate you so much. Thank each and every one of you for listening to another episode of the Get Loved Up podcast. I hope you have gained a lot of resources from this episode. Definitely go grab that book, Happy Days, and definitely listen to the audio. I love listening to audio. I love listening to Gabby tell the story of her life. It's really beautiful. And until next time, love yourself, love others, and love the world. One day at a time, one breath at a time. Peace and love.
I just want to take a moment to say thank you for being part of the Get Loved Up community. I like to share topics and people making a positive impact in the world, and your feedback means the world to me. If you haven't already left a review, please leave a 5-star review and let me know what you want to hear more of on the show. I'm here for you, and together we're making the world a better place, one day at a time, one show at a time. Thank you for listening.